Alright, first thing to remember, and something that's going to have to be a checkpoint before you start playing for a while, is your thumb placement. And the idea is to keep your thumb in the center of your hand. So let's say you're holding your 8, 10, and 12. Your thumb should be about behind the 8th or 9th fret. So if you're holding 8, 10, and 12, thumb's going to be right behind the 9th fret. And even if you're doing 8, 10, and 12, again, your thumb is basically behind the 9th fret. So you can aim. I basically aim to have my thumb approximately between my 2nd and 3rd fingers. And if I'm holding 8, 9, 10, and 12, then thumb fits nice and even behind the 2nd, 3rd finger. If I move down here, say 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fret, thumb is behind the 2nd and 3rd finger again. Actually, in the camera angle here, it looks like it's really behind the 3rd finger, but as long as it's behind the 2nd or 3rd finger, kind of in this area, you're good. It's when you go back over here, that's where problems occur. So, we discussed proper fingers. So let's use the C scale as an example because it's a pretty symmetrical scale. It has all 3 different finger patterns that are used an equal amount of times. So the first pattern that gets used is 2 whole steps. So you're using your 1st, 2nd, and 4th finger, so I will mimic that for the moment. So we're going to do it in 8, 10, and 12. Go ahead and use your 1st, 2nd, and 4th fingers. When you get up to the D string, you are going to use the same set of fingers, and this pattern is a half step followed by a whole step. When you go to the B string, you're going to change your fingers and follow the pattern of whole step followed by a half step. So you will use your 1st, 3rd, and 4th fingers. And the same thing for this high E. And then when you're coming back down the scale, same fingers you use going up as back down. So 4th, 3rd, and 1st finger. And then you switch it to the 4th, 2nd, and 1st finger. And then, because this is what fits your hand better, we'll stick with the 4th, 2nd, and 1st. Now, fair warning, there are some chords, if you decide you want to take chord theory fairly far, there are chords that will require you to have that stretch with your ring, or between your ring and your 4th finger anyway. Something like a major add 9. This is a pretty tough chord, especially when you go all the way down to the 1st fret. I can barely pull this off. I do not practice it at all because of how much of a pain in the ass it is. The distortion is helping me out to fill in some sound. Look, I have to lean over this far just to get the chord. So anyway, it's much easier if you don't do the bar. Still a pain in the butt. Especially if you have any fingernails whatsoever to get in the way. But anyway, that's not a common thing to do, but it is something that can happen. So we may have to work on stretching between the 3rd and 4th fingers at some point. But we got plenty of exercises to help with that. Speaking of exercises, let's go over the first riff written out today. So this is written to help solidify the correct fingering at the top of that C scale. So everything is ascending on each string. So we're going to go for the E and the B string will have your 1st, 3rd, and 4th fingers. The G and D string will have your 1st, 2nd, and 4th fingers. And before you start, make sure that you get your thumb behind the center of your hand. And another thing, try and kind of push your hand out a little bit like you're making a claw right now. You want to avoid collapsing your hand at all. This is a pretty common thing for people to do. They kind of collapse their fingers, which is kind of why a lot of people have their thumb like this. So make sure that your fingers are more up on the tip. With that in mind, you're not going to have your fingers so on the tip that they're not touching anything else, because there's actually a good deal of muting that happens with your fretting hand while you are playing things. What I mean by that, and I hope I'm not going too fast with stuff at the moment, but just so you know, your index finger especially will do a great deal of muting. So let's say when you're on the B string, 10th fret, your index finger will need to be placed pretty much on the tip. You don't want it so far on the tip that it's only touching the B string though. You need it on the tip just enough so it's not, you're not barring the B and the E string, but you need it flat enough so the E string is being muted. And also, you're going to be barely touching the G string. Your index finger will be muting out all adjacent strings, so the ones that are nearly adjacent. Obviously, you can't mute the low E string with your index finger because it's not adjacent. But the E and the G string are when you're on the B string. So this way, when you strum all three strings on accident, only the B string is ringing out. And especially when you have distortion on, there will be a lot of sympathetic noise happening. You're gonna, anytime you let go of a string, especially when distortion is on, there will be some kind of string vibration, and you want to eliminate that as much as possible. So that's why I mentioned the finger muting, and why you want your fingers to be on the tips, but not so far on the tips that you're unable to mute adjacent strings. So anyway, back to the exercise here. Before you do it, make sure your thumb is in the middle of your hand. Keep your fingers pretty much on the tips, and here it is. Alright, and the other exercise, doing the hammer-ons. So first, second, and fourth fingers on the way up. First, third, and fourth fingers on the way down. Make sure that you keep your fingers down as much as possible as you do this, so your index finger will only move off the guitar when you are changing strings in order to perform more of the exercise. So remember, the arrow just means, like the diagonal arrow pointing up, you're going to play the same frets going up all 6 strings. Diagonal arrow pointing down, same frets going down all 6 strings. So here is that exercise. And check your thumb. And go ahead and work on getting some speed on that too. Just when you start to get more comfortable with it, just start adding some speed in there. That wasn't the right exercise. There we go. Apparently I need to practice it. Well, obviously it doesn't need to be that fast, but if you can start getting some speed on that, that'd be good. I want to keep changing the fingers on this thing. So used to certain scales, my fingers want to go to what they're familiar with. Alright, if you got any questions with this, let me know. You said you're out of town next week, so we'll plan on meeting up again in 2 weeks. And I'll see you then.